Your company commits $3 million to AWS based on projected growth. Now, 6 months later, your cloud spend is spiraling, but you're locked into that commitment. Meanwhile, engineering teams are spinning up instances without considering costs, business units are buying redundant tools, and nobody can tell you which workloads are actually delivering business value. Can you see the pattern? Almost every organization moves to the cloud before establishing governance. They chase speed and agility, then watch costs explode while trying to optimize their way out of commitments that they shouldn't have made in the first place. I'm Rob Boyd, and this is Priority 3 from Worldwide Technology's Strategic IT Value Creation Research, Proactive Cloud Governance.
WWT presents Research.
This is the third priority in a 4-part framework for transforming IT from a cost center into a value driver. The first 2 priorities establish something critical: visibility into what you're actually spending across hundreds of software licenses, and strategic partnerships that give you execution capacity that you can't build alone. Priority 3 takes those capabilities, visibility and strategic partnerships, and then applies them to one of technology's most complex challenges: cloud spending. Because without the organizational foundation to see clearly and act decisively, you end up on the hamster wheel that we're about to discuss. To understand why cloud governance fails and what actually fixes it, I talked with 2 experts from WWT who see these patterns daily: Josh Bushman, who leads cloud cost management and marketplace operations, and Jenny Halidik, who specializes in FinOps services as well as building sustainable governance practices.
What we really are seeing is that oftentimes, companies may have a governance policy that they start with, and then through, either quick growth of their cloud landscape or acquisitions of various companies, that tends to just kind of break down a little bit. And then all of a sudden, there is not a standardized governance policy that's really being implemented. It's very difficult to continue to optimize your environment if you are continually, bringing new workloads on. Cloud is super dynamic, so it's never going to stay the same. And that is just something that a lot of companies struggle with. Without that structure, you're going to be on that hamster wheel. So we want to make sure that there is that governance strategy to enable the teams to optimize where it's, making an impact on the organization from an operational perspective.
I like that. Trying to optimize without governance is like being on a hamster wheel. You're working really hard. You're implementing recommendations. You're right-sizing instances and cleaning up unused resources. And then 3 months later, costs have crept right back up because nothing about the organizational structure changed. You're treating symptoms without addressing the underlying disease.
We definitely see it everywhere, right? Whether it be from a CFO, signing a large commit because they're maybe having investment from Google or AWS or Microsoft into their company. So they say, yes, we're going to go make this huge commit because they're committing to us before checking with the CTO, right? That could be one instance of it happening. Or they're just being pushed to end of year, we have money to spend. And if we commit to X amount of dollars, we're going to get this extra, savings on our consumption before really going out and do that workload assessment or just assessing their software spend that could go through the marketplace. We see it all the time. And really, I would say that when you're going to make a commit to a hyperscaler or you're talking about your consumption, you really want to have at least a year or 9 months before you even make that commit. You want to go out there, make sure that number one, to Jenny's point, you have, good governance in place and you have buy-in from multiple business units. Because if it's one business unit making a decision without conferring with the others, we see it every day. It does not work out well.
Josh told me that most organizations bring them in 3 months before a major commitment, sometimes less. And by then, the pressure is enormous. The timeline is compressed. So what is actually missing? It's not tools, talent, or even data. Cloud providers give us plenty. What's missing is the organizational structure that turns all those inputs into coordinated action with actual authority behind it. Well, something referred to in the research as a cloud center of excellence, the cross-functional structure that builds together finance, operations, engineering, security, and business units with actual decision-making authority. Many organizations will tell you that they have this, but it helps to keep asking questions.
I'll use a use case here, and I'm going to keep names out of it, but a very large outdoor retail client of ours, they have a governance committee in place. They have a software purchasing committee in place. And we actually met with them the other day, and they were talking about how, one of the ways they kind of held back on having some of that sprawl, and specifically around software purchases, where people are going out and purchasing something on a credit card, right? Instead of it may not run through the marketplace, which gives it some governance, but they're going out and purchasing a small amount on a credit card, and now they've have 3 or 4 different organizations doing that, internally. And instead of combining that into one, let's just use Palo Alto as an example, go combine that into one Palo Alto EA and really buy in bulk. They're purchasing 3 or 4 different, ways through Palo, and they could have saved money by doing that. And what they've done is through these committees kind of shut that down, right? So now all these purchases have to be approved. You can't go out and purchase something on a credit card.
Well, this large retailer has committees with actual authority, vetted, approved processes, and it works. They stopped the sprawl before it became a problem. Now here's the contrast.
We've got another customer in the utility sector that, has a big FinOps team, but has limited governance in place. And they really have that same kind of, I'd say, software sprawl or rogue purchasing problem. They don't have the people that are really focused in on that. So it's great to have governance, but if you don't have all the different, I'd say, departments in place in that governance, it's not going to work, right? It can't be one department that has governance and then you have 3 or 4 that do not have it. You're going to get that sprawl and just that hidden kind of spend that goes behind the scenes.
A large utility company, they have a FinOps team, probably talented, probably working really hard, but without the organizational structure that includes all the stakeholders with the authority to actually govern decisions, they're dealing with the same sprawl problems as companies without any governance at all.
That's where we see companies struggle to drive that people and process aspect of FinOps. Oftentimes, that is the hardest part to figure out, is getting kind of that muscle memory within the organization stakeholders on, starting to think with that financial hat on what their cloud usage is doing to the organization from a billing perspective, where CCoE helps bring that together and provides those guidelines across finance, engineering, the different business units, security operations, making sure that there is really that cross-functional team or champion of teams that is really driving for the same goals. And oftentimes, if you look at somebody within engineering has a different goal of what's seen as successful in their role versus finance. And pulling together everybody and making sure they understand the drivers, but then also what does their specific role have within the organization from an impact standpoint, and helping to kind of drive those policies where it's providing that structure.
This is the maturity gap that both Josh and Jenny have been referring to. Organizations think we have visibility or we have governance. And then you dig one level deeper and discover that they have tools without structure or recommendations without authority to act on them. The Cloud Center of Excellence isn't another team doing cloud optimization. It's the organizational framework that makes optimization sustainable. It's finance, engineering, and business units making decisions together instead of in some kind of linear sequence. It's shared accountability instead of finger pointing when the costs are spiking. And here's what matters. You can build this incrementally. You don't need perfect structure on day one.
A top-down mandate where, at the C-level, they've decided that is an important thing that they're going to drive within the organization. But another area where we see success is more of, kind of the grassroots level where, one business unit, whether it's IT or a specific business unit, starts to build out best practices around, kind of implementing that framework from a FinOps perspective. And then, they're able to evangelize that within an organization to say, hey, look at what we've achieved over here. We'd love to kind of execute this across the board.
Start with one business unit, prove the value, then expand. The structure matters more than where it starts, but you have to start building the structure, not just implementing more tools or even hiring more people to make recommendations that nobody acts on. With that organizational foundation in mind, the research identifies 4 strategic practices that only work when you have the right structure in place. Number 1, establish a Cloud Center of Excellence as your FinOps foundation. That's the big one. Number 2, optimize before you commit. 3, implement continuous optimization. And then number 4, strategic vendor and tool consolidation. So I want to walk through what each of these actually mean when you have the organizational structure to support them. All right, back to practice 1. We've talked about CCoE as the organizational structure that enables everything else. But what does it actually look like to establish one as your FinOps foundation?
It's great to have that FinOps practice. And if you don't have buy-in across the board, let's say the FinOps department says, hey, we're noticing that your cloud spend has increased this month. We may have these recommendations that we would say. If they don't have buy-in and nothing happens from those recommendations, then what's the point of having a FinOps team if there's not buy-in and they're not actually listening to those recommendations and then deploying those to help with the cloud savings?
This isn't about creating another siloed team. It's about creating the framework where finance understands engineering constraints, engineering understands cost implications, and business units, well, they understand both. Shared accountability instead of sequential handoffs. Without this foundation, the cross-functional structure with actual authority, the other three practices just can't work. You can't optimize before committing if different business units are making isolated decisions. You can't implement continuous optimization if recommendations have no teeth. And you can't consolidate vendors if no one has visibility across the silos. That's why practice 1 is the foundation. Practice 2, optimize before you commit. Most organizations, well, they do the opposite.
If you're planning commitments, don't rush without structure. If you've already made a commitment, still build out a CCoE for the next cycle. Engage your partners early and get help with that visibility and forecasting for your next commitment that you're going to make. And think, I'd say 1 to 2 year, but think 3-year transformation, not 3-month, right? I can't tell you how many times we get brought into a conversation of a commit with a cloud provider 3 months before they're ready to close it. And at that point, it's really way too late in the game.
3 months versus 2 years. That's the gap between reactive firefighting and strategic planning. But what if you've already made commitments without this structure in place?
A customer has already done this where they've gone out and committed to a large amount. And let's say, a $10 million commit, and they go out and they spend $10 million of native consumption on a cloud provider. And then the next year they figure out, hey, we were 70% optimized, right? We need to cut that back. And they go and make that optimization. Well, now they're going to be shy by, $3 million. How can they make that up? Well, purchase your third-party software through the marketplace. So there are ways to wind back. You can take that data to the cloud provider the next go around and say, hey, look, our consumption, our native consumption is actually down. So this is why we want negative growth, or this is why we want to just stay at a 0% growth rate over the next 3 years. So there are ways to wind it back, but you really have to get out in front of that. The marketplace is one of those ways to roll back on an overcommit.
Well, this marketplace strategy does 2 things. It helps you meet current obligations while buying time to build the organizational structure that prevents problems in the next cycle, which brings us to making optimization sustainable. Practice 3. Well, this is where the hamster wheel breaks, or maybe it doesn't. But without organizational structure, optimization is episodic. You do a project, you get some savings, costs creep back up, repeat. With CCoE structure, optimization becomes operational capability. And here's why that matters. Cloud technology, it's constantly changing. New instance types, new pricing models, new architectural options. AWS isn't going to proactively notify you when there's a cheaper alternative. You need someone continuously monitoring those changes. And that someone needs the organizational authority to actually act on what they find. That's what a CCoE enables.
Again, without that structure, optimization you're going to be on that hamster wheel entirely. So we want to make sure that there is that governance strategy to enable the teams to optimize where it's, making an impact on the organization from an operational perspective. Making sure that the team from a FinOps perspective is sitting down, at least on a monthly basis, just to review, make sure that they understand, again, what is the cloud usage? How is that driving costs? And a lot of times that goes back to that value conversation, Rob.
You may not want to optimize a specific workload because it's not what the business needs. Painting out that picture of value, and we're going to make this decision to potentially not optimize this workload because that's not what's right for the business.
That last point is crucial. Continuous optimization doesn't mean blindly cutting costs. It means having the organizational structure to make value-based trade-offs. Sometimes the right decision is to spend more on a workload that's driving business outcomes. But you can only make that decision when you have finance, engineering, and business stakeholders in the same room working with the same data. The final practice is vendor and tool consolidation, and this is where CCoE structure really proves its value when it comes to visibility.
We have tools on the SAM Plus team that, SaaS-based tools that can go in and pull a lot of your SaaS-based applications. So we can, give them a view of what they have running. And a lot of times they don't know about some of it, right? Or they don't even know that, maybe there's utilization in there where they've bought a tool, they've got 500 licenses and they're utilizing 5. So we do have tools that can go out there and pull some of that data. And then that's really more around the software asset management piece of it. We see it all the time. Absolutely. I mean, there can be multiple business units using, I'd say, security tools that do the same, maybe zero trust type actions, but they're utilizing 3 different vendors for that.
CCoE provides the cross-functional visibility to see these patterns, not just we have these tools, but why do we have these 3 tools doing the same thing, and what would consolidation enable us to do?
That really helps build out that cross-functional visibility, making sure that you understand what are the cloud services they're paying for today, what are they maybe paying for from a software perspective, making sure that there's not redundancy in some of the potential tools that they're using across the board. It's getting a lot more complex. There's a ton of different tools that solve a bunch of different unique problems across the board. And so how do we help consolidate that within companies to make sure that there's not a duplication of efforts there or investment?
So how do you actually start building this cloud center of excellence structure?
We want to understand what a client's unique pain points are, getting an understanding of, within their current organizational structure, how is that organized from a governance standpoint? Is that CCoE? Is that FinOps? Who are the main stakeholders that are driving that? Or does that need to be developed? And that's something that they're trying to build out today. And then what is your visibility? Do you have good visibility? Are there areas where you're lacking? Do you understand your spend? What are the processes around there to really manage it? What are some of the capabilities that your team has and maybe lacks where we could kind of step in to help augment that? Cloud FinOps Readiness Workshop really helps us to kind of figure out, again, where are they today and what does a potential roadmap look like for them as they're continuing to build out that structure and implementing all of those best practices within an organization. There's crawl, walk, run from a maturity standpoint on the FinOps. It's okay if you're not mature in every aspect, and maybe that doesn't make sense for your business. So again, it's really understanding kind of the unique needs of a client to help them with a path forward.
The assessment reveals where organizational structure exists versus where it's missing. Sometimes you have tools, but no coordination. Sometimes you have a team, but no authority. Sometimes you have visibility, but no process to act on it. The key insight from both Josh and Jenny, you can start wherever you are. Grassroots or top down, one business unit or enterprise-wide. The structure can begin small and expand as it proves value. Well, we opened with that uncomfortable scenario, the multi-million-dollar commitment made before establishing governance, the spiraling cost, the optimization hamster wheel that never stops. As may be obvious, cloud governance is different from your typical technology challenge. You can't tool your way out of it. You can't hire your way out of it. You can't even optimize your way out of it. Well, not sustainably anyway. You need organizational structure, a cloud center of excellence that brings the right people together with actual authority to govern cloud spending. The 4 practices that we've discussed, they only work within that organizational framework. All right, so going back up a level to our research focused on IT value creation, today's show has been focused on priority 3, cloud governance. Each priority builds on the other. Priority 1 stressed licensing visibility, tracking what you actually have across hundreds of software licenses and understanding where the waste hides. Priority 2 emphasized strategic partnerships, setting expectations for the partners that you should be working with, completing your teams with specialized skill sets that you can't build alone. Now, priority 3, today's show, illustrated the structural guidance enabled by the Cloud Center of Excellence framework, transforming reactive optimization into proactive governance. All 3 of these build up to priority 4 as we dig into the considerations and importance of workload placement. Because once you've mastered visibility, partnerships, and governance, you can optimize workload placements based on actual value delivery, not just cost or convenience. These are not isolated tactics. They're integrated capabilities that compound over time, transforming how your organization creates value from technology investment. So please do check out the complete research paper on IT value creation at wwt.com. You're going to find even more details and links to valuable resources across all 4 priorities. Just start wherever you are in your journey, but start building the organizational capabilities that make optimization sustainable, not episodic. I'm Rob Boyd. Thanks for watching WWT Presents Research.
This episode is supported by Proofpoint. Proofpoint delivers advanced threat protection and compliance solutions to safeguard your organization's critical data. Protect your enterprise with Proofpoint's comprehensive cybersecurity offerings.